Hi everyone and welcome to another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I'm your host Anthony Gamer
And I am Humphrey the Wolf.
and today we're going to be discussing PAL exclusive games for the Atari 2600. Alright, in the world today we have two different types of television display systems. In Europe they have what's called PAL, which delivers a frame rate of 25 SPS frame per second with 625 lines. While in North America, we use NTSC, which delivers a frame rate of 30 FPS using 525 lines. With these two formats in mind, it's going to be obvious that video games made for one format are not going to be the same as video games for the other format. In other words, a game that you would play readily, easily in England would not be playable in North America and vice versa. With that in mind, there were some games that were made in North America that were never released in Europe.
And vice versa. There were some games in Europe that were never released in North America.
That's correct, Humphrey, and today we're going to be discussing those games. We're not going to be discussing regional lockout that much, as the games that were made for the 2600 were not subject to regional lockout. In other words, a cartridge that you purchased in North America would be the exact same size as one purchased in Europe.
I have a quick question. What's that? What exactly is regional lockout?
Well, regional lockout, according to Wikipedia, is a class of digital rights management preventing the use of a certain product or service, such as multimedia or a hardware device, outside a certain region of territory. Regional lockout could be enforced through physical means, through technical means such as detecting the user's IP address or using an identifying code, or through unintentional means introduced by devices only supporting certain regional technologies. Like I said, NTSC and PAL.
Now, why would anyone do a regional lockout?
Well, good question. And it may be enforced for several reasons, such as to stagger the release of a certain product, to avoid losing sales to the product's foreign publisher, to maximize products' impact in a certain region through localization, to hinder gray market imports by enforcing price discrimination, or to prevent users from accessing certain content in their territory because of legal reasons, either due to copyright laws, censorship, or distributor doesn't have the rights to certain intellectual property outside their specified region. In other words, in some countries in the world, certain games, movies, and TV shows and cartoons have been banned, whether for religious or social reasons. So in other words, if you'd like to try some of the games that are being listed on today's episode and you live in North America, the only way you're going to be able to do it, aside from getting a converter, which is going to cost you quite a bit of money and time, is to play these games on an emulator.
As most emulators are actually region free.
Correct. However, in some emulators, not the Atari ones, I'm talking more about the ones for PS1 and some of those, you may have to make a couple adjustments in the options area. So make sure that if you are trying to play PAL games on an emulator from another system, read your documentation to make sure that you do it correctly. On an interesting side note, the Atari 2600, as I just said, doesn't have regional locking, but the 7800 did. However, they were not the first game company to do this. So in today's trivia question, what is the name of the first video game company to use regional lockout? You think you know the answer? Well, wait till the end and see if you're correct.
I think by now it's obvious
What's obvious?
that this man sitting right next to me was a teacher. Can't you tell?
Yeah, I guess that's pretty obvious. I told you. Anyway, so let's get started with the games. You ready?
I've been ready 4 minutes ago when you started.
All right, let's get started on the games. And our first one is a game that I recently discovered. One of my loyal viewers pointed this game out to me, and it's called My Golf. This game, although it was made by an American company, Absolute Entertainment, it was never made available in America. So let's check it out. Now, My Golf is your typical 18 holes of golf. And like most golf games that were made after the late 80s, it uses the 3-tap method. Really a cool game. The graphics are very realistic. Gameplay is very realistic. And I would have to say that until I played Edward Smith's new golf game, this had to be probably the single best golf game made for the Atari 2600. And again, for reasons I'm not quite sure, unless some of you that are viewing this know, this game was never released in North America. If you'd like to see Anthony bumble his way through 18 holes of golf on this game, please visit our Patreon page where you can watch Anthony make a fool of himself trying to play golf. You know what? No one asked for your comments. You're not much better yourself. Yeah, that's true, but still, it's much more fun to watch you because you're not afraid to show people how terrible you are at golf. Next up, we have Farmyard Fun that was released by a company called Suntech in 1983. It also goes by the names Farm Fun and Home Sweet Home. One thing that a lot of games in PAL format have in common is that they like to feature music in the background. Sometimes, however, this music can be kind of annoying and distracting, so if you get a chance to play some of these games, it might be a good idea to turn the sound down. In this particular game, you are a little boy trying to collect eggs, but be careful that these chickens don't really like you taking their eggs, and they will attack and kill you. Next up, we have Bobby is Going Home. This was originally released by a company from Germany called Quell from 1983. Alright, in this game, the protagonist is a little boy named Bobby who is trying to get home. This is your typical multi-screen platformer game. It reminds me a lot of Pitfall. Now, you see that bird that's flying around there? He's about on every screen, and for some reason, he's got a problem with Bobby and tries to stop him from getting home. One thing I really enjoy is the backgrounds. They're just beautiful. The music can get a little annoying, and it's kind of inconsistent from one screen to the next. Now, if you don't recognize that song, it's one called Take It to the Lord in Prayer, which is one that, growing up in a Methodist church, I used to hear all the time. Like I said, not a very difficult game. It's very user-friendly for like little hands because you can actually kind of change your direction in mid-jump. Biggest annoyance in this game is that bird. That really makes this game a little more difficult than it probably should be. But strangely enough, this game, according to my research, has been pretty much released everywhere in the world except for North America. Next up, from 1983, we have Forest by the company Sancho. This has got to be one of the most bizarre Atari games I have ever played, either on this side or that side of the pond. Okay, now the story behind this bizarre game is this, and this comes directly from the instruction manual. In this game, a poor woodcutter wants to get to the forest to cut trees so he can support his family. Unfortunately, a witch has cast a spell on all the animals in the forest. Instead of being his friends, the animals are all trying to attack the poor woodcutter. The object is to have the woodcutter walk to the right across two screens. When the third screen appears, there will be a tree in the middle. The woodcutter must cut down the tree while avoiding the animals. The tree must be hit with 4 blows of the axe on each side. Also, you can get extra points from killing the animals with your axe, or jumping over them for no points. It just is up to you. Personally, I would have no trouble killing some animals that are trying to kill me. Also, you have that duck or goose or whatever that thing is that keeps pooping on you, and when the poop hits you, you're frozen for a few seconds. Yeah, as I said, probably one of the single most bizarre games I've ever seen in my life. Honestly, the game is actually kind of fun, I guess, but again, that crazy music is just making me crazy. It does have replayability, as if you are able to beat the game, or the level, I should say. I don't think this game ever really ends. You keep coming back, and the animals come back quicker, and that bird poops on you more times. Next up, we have Criminal Pursuit from Suntech from 1983. Alright, now in Criminal Pursuit, this is one of probably the best platformer games I've ever played. In this one, you take on the role of Fingers. He is a international jewel thief, and you are at the Mongrath City Museum, and you're trying to steal these priceless treasures. There are 8 different kinds of treasures, which appear only one at a time. Fingers has to avoid the guard and his vicious dog to pick up the valuables before another one appears. Once Fingers has grabbed all 8 valuables, a helicopter will appear to help him escape. If Fingers is safe, the next round will begin.
No, I totally agree. It's got to be one of the most original, and I would have to, dare I say, one of the best platformer games on this list, or just about any other list I've ever seen. My biggest concern with this game is the fact that there is very little sound. In other words, some games have too much sound, and this one has very little at all. Right, but I mean, you are playing a cat burglar, and you are trying to be quiet, and it does let you know when you get caught, but I agree there is something missing as far as the sound goes, which for me doesn't take away from the fact that this is a really, really fun game. Next up, we have Nightmare from Sancho from 1983. Now, the name of this game says it all. You're a little boy trying to escape a bad dream. You have these birds that are trying to kill you and stop you from escaping. You have to make it to the top of this helicopter in a short amount of time before time runs out and before this evil snake gets you. The game gets more bizarre, as time goes on. But to be honest, it has to be one of the most original games I think I've ever seen, whether it be on PAL format or in North America. Alright, next up we have Parachute, also known as Skydiver, and Von Himmel durch die Hölle, which was made in 1983 by a company called Home Vision Gem International. In this arcade avoid'em game, you are parachuting out of an airplane, and you are trying to avoid several obstacles on the way and land safely on a pad at an army base. Now, this game, I would say it's pretty much one of the best games I've ever played, if not probably, I would say, a game that just about anybody can enjoy. The only downside to this game is this annoying music, which again, like I said, seems to be a reoccurring theme in some of these games. Recently, a homebrew programmer is making his own version of this game, and thankfully, he is not including the music. And next up, we have Panda, also known as Panda Quest, Panda Rescue, UFO Attack, and just plain Panda, or the Hungry Panda. Yeah, it's got a whole bunch of games, depending on what part of the world you play this game in. It's an arcade action platformer game, and it was released just about everywhere in the world except North America. In this game, you are this little panda. You keep falling into different habitats, and you're trying to get out without getting killed by the other animals in the zoo, and you're ultimately, as far as I can tell, on a quest for bamboo. Okay. Alright, and next up we have the game Nuts from Technovision, 1983. In this particular game, you are a squirrel that has a stash of nuts of various types within these two trees, and you have this weasel that is trying to steal your nuts, and you have to stop him by chucking rocks at him. This game, although it sounds kind of simple, it is quite addictive, and after a while the action gets very fast-paced. I would say this game does have a lot of replayability, and I've actually played this game one time for hours on end, but be careful, because sometimes that weasel will huck rocks right back at you. Now next up we have a game called Hey Stop. Now, a lot of the games that were made in PAL format were actually kind of watered-down versions of established video games in North America, as not all North American games had distribution in Europe. And this is an example of kind of almost a hack of another game. Hey, wait a minute, this is Keystone Capers. Well, sort of. In this particular version, you take on the role of a robot security guard that is chasing after an alien thief, I guess, and you're trying to catch him before time runs out, much like in the original Keystone Capers game. Now, why I included this is it reminds me a lot of a really bad horror movie I saw when I was a kid called Chopping Mall, in which these robot security guards that were supposed to be protecting the mall actually went around killing people. And this is kind of the same, except for that you are a robot trying to catch someone. I don't think you're actually going to kill them. But again, this is an example of one of those kind of watered down, reimagined North American games that were released in Europe. Next up from Quell from 1983, we have Motocross. Your typical motorcycle racing game. Not horribly original, but yet at the same time, it's not really a genre that was actually beat to death, as there really weren't a whole lot of motorcycle racing games that were out at that time. I really enjoyed it. It really brought to mind the game Grand Prix in a lot of ways. Really cool game. I'm really surprised that this game was not ported out in the United States, as it seemed like it was ported out just about everywhere else in the world. And our final game for today is called Clown Downtown. The game itself is actually very, very lame. You are this clown and you're walking around downtown and you're trying to jump over the cop and not get caught. I don't know what the clown did wrong. The only reason I'm including this game is because I love the background. They did an amazing job with these background graphics and the way they have the things moving. It's just a brilliant game in that respect, that you get to see all these moving things in the background. Very nice job done. Even though, like I said, the game itself is pretty lame, even by standards of those days, they did an amazing job with the background. So that is why I included it on this list.
And the answer to today's trivia question: what is the name of the first game company to use regional lockout? And the answer is
Nintendo. When they first released the Famicom in Japan, it would be different than the version sold in America called the Nintendo Entertainment System. A couple of the differences between the two are different case and physical layout, which is pretty obvious if you've never seen a Famicom and you've played an NES. The cartridge slot has fewer pins, as it didn't support the 10 NES lockout chip. One of the controllers had a microphone on it for voice-activated gaming, and the expansion port on the bottom of the NES versus the DB15 port on the Famicom. However, you can play Famicom games on the NES with a simple add-on that you can find on a lot of places like Amazon, and they usually go for around $10 to $15. However, on the flip side, a converter to play North American games on a Famicom is very rare and also very expensive. The cheapest I've seen those go for around $75.
Well, that brings us to the end of another episode of Classic Gamer 74. I really hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to give us a great big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to click that little bell icon down there at the bottom so you'll be notified when we release new episodes. And please consider helping us out on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can help this channel to grow, and you will be able to get some exclusive Patreon goodies, such as our podcast and some extra game footage. So please, be generous and help us out on Patreon.
In our next episode, we return back to the sports arena, where we will be discussing bowling games. There are quite a few of those, probably some you've never heard of, and some that you're probably really going to want to play after you see this. So do not miss the next episode.
Well, until next time, this has been Anthony Gamer, and I'm Humphrey the Wolf, and we will see each and every one of you in our next episode. Until then, have yourselves a great day. Goodbye. Goodbye, everyone.